believe I was 10 years old. There was a program at the Y called Little Women that met on Saturday mornings, and there must have been 5 clubs named after the 4 daughters and the mother, maybe the grandmother, whoever that was in the Little Women book. And we met every Saturday morning, and we had swim lessons, and we played in the gym, and we did dramatics, and it was a couple of hours each Saturday, and then we'd all meet in the old cafeteria and wait for our parents to pick us up, and we always would tell them to come a little later, and they had the best French fries. We'd have French fries and vanilla Cokes in the cafeteria, and so that was my introduction to the Y. I went through, I guess I would be what you called a Y rat. I joined the junior tri-high Y clubs, which met once a week at the Y. We had requirements of a club. We had to have dues. We had to elect officers. We had to do something for philanthropy, something social, community service. From there, you went into the high Y clubs, which were high school, and those met weekly in someone's home. Same thing, we had requirements to fulfill socially, philanthropy, community service, elected officers, collected dues. It was a serious deal. All the Y clubs had a charter day in the beginning of the fall to get us going. It was at one of the churches, and it was a pretty important deal where we'd get a charter for the club for the year and take an oath to uphold the bylaws and the rules and fulfill all the obligations for the club. My Y club was Christie Y Club. We ended up with 30 girls in it. We stayed together all 4 years, and we also had the same counselor for all 4 years. She was a Northwestern junior when she started with us, and we all went to her wedding, her graduation, and for 2 years after, while she taught, she stayed with our club until college, and we all graduated. I went to Camp Echo starting when I was 10 years old as well. Went through the ranks of Camp Echo. I continued with Camp Echo through age 21. Then I had a small break, like going to graduate school and things like that. And then when I came back to Evanston, I rejoined the Y. I had small children at the time. I started babysitting at the Y, then I started teaching fitness classes at the Y, and my kids came up through the preschool programs at the Y. And then I went back to Echo as one of the original staff for Women's Wellness, I think in 1983, and stayed with that for 10 years. And our family also did family camp for about 15 years. I then was the first social worker at Camp Echo, and I did that for 5 years. And I recently, summer before last, I went to help my daughter who needed a social worker at camp for a session, and I went back. And I think I figured I spent 40 summers up at Camp Echo. So, and I also produced Brilliantine for 5 years as an adult, and had been in Brilliantine for 2 years when I was in high school. So that's my history with the Y. And my children's are much the same. They grew up at the Y, Camp Echo, Rats, involved in Brilliantine, State Youth and Government. My youngest daughter has spent the last 2 summers as main camp director of Camp Echo. Her first time at Camp Echo, she was 10 days old. Brilliantine has been around for, I think, 59 years or something like that. It is for juniors and seniors in high school, and it is, at least most years, it's anyone who sort of comes in the door to audition. It's really more of a sign-up. What's nice about Brilliantine versus a high school production is anybody can be in it, and many students get a chance to perform, and they've never had an opportunity to perform before. It's not as competitive as the high school. It's very near and dear to my heart. I was in Guys and Dolls in 1969, and then in 1970 I got the lead in Little Mary Sunshine, opposite Bill Geiger, who was Big Jim Warrington. And it was a really neat thing for me because I never would have had the opportunity to have any type of lead. At the high school, I was always in the chorus, but I was never going to go any further. And so it was kind of validating for me that, hey, maybe I can sing a little bit. So I enjoyed that, and then I went back, and as an adult, while my two older kids were in high school, was the adult show board producer. And the anniversary show, we have one night where we are at King Lab. Turns out we don't book a show that night because if the basketball team goes downstate, we lose half the cast. So we're going to do a Brilliantine review that night, and Bill twisted my arm to help out, and I limited it to, if they come up with the people and the numbers and stuff, I will weave together a show that makes some type of sense, so it's just not a number, blackout, and I will do the one rehearsal, I will direct it, and the one rehearsal on Saturday before the performance from 10 to 4, and then we go on that night. So we're hoping to get alum from as far back as we can and have them involved at all levels, whether they want to be in a number of their show or help with sound or lights or publicity or whatever. It's almost like it was yesterday. They're very vivid in my mind. I have the whole Canadian Mounties were really the football players who had never been on stage, and they basically didn't know their left from the right, and that was always pretty hysterical, and they had to lift me up on stage at one point on their shoulders, and they had a hard time sort of getting that together. I mean, they were great football players, but on stage they didn't quite have the finesse. That was fun. It was interesting. I mean, one time I was tied to a tree, and Big Jim Warrington was coming to save me, and he whispered, "I just had a double Whopper with extra onions," and then proceeded to sing in my face. So that I remember. And I remember my mom coming 2 nights before opening, and I had been costumed by the costume crew, and there were some other kids who had been costumed by their parents, and she just didn't like that idea, and she went home and stayed up the next 48 hours and made 2 of the most beautiful costumes for the show, and then looked at me and said, "You really can sing." So that was kind of neat. And then my dad had to take my dress to the cleaners every morning after a performance because I was thrown over an Indian brave's shoulder and he had makeup all over him. So after the performance each night I had Indian makeup all over my dress. So every morning my dad took the dress to the cleaners. Every night he picked it up. And the other interesting thing is Bill and I had both been Brilliantine Scholarship Award winners our senior year, and Liza was a Brilliantine Scholarship Award winner her senior year. You know, it's really neat. We sort of brought my husband into the fold. I mean, he was a Johnny-come-lately. Even though he grew up in Skokie, he wasn't involved with the Y, and so he ended up becoming involved in the Y through me, and then family camp. And when Bill was Camp Echo director, he nominated Steve to be on the board of the Y, so he was on the board of the Y for 10 years back then, and now he's back on the board of the Y. And I think the thing that's really neat about our family is we've really all embraced and sort of lived the body, mind, spirit. It was interesting each year to see the group of kids come. I was always amazed every year how you could have a huge cast of, 150 kids or whatever, and have them all cross the stage and at least be on the center of the stage at least once, every kid in the cast. There was something for all of them to do. Each year was a little different. You had stronger people some year than other years in different positions, but to see the kids take on these roles of, getting ads for the ad book and putting the ad book together and ticket sales, and this was before we had, email and online things, so to staff it and to coordinate schedules and to get your volunteers. It was fun to sort of sit back and see students, seniors now, start to understand the frustrations that some of us as adults would have trying to get kids to do things, because now they're trying to get people to do things and put on a production. So it was fun, and it was fun to be able to be backstage and chat with the kids and sometimes police them a little bit and make sure that they weren't hurt and that we're making good judgments. But each year was different. One memory, I was out in what's now called the Birches, but way back then it wasn't part of camp's land, and we were on an overnight. My name at camp was AJ, and I remember waking up and somebody saying, AJ, there's someone calling your name out on the lake. And I wake up, and the lightning is unbelievable, and there's obviously going to be a storm, and I see a little tiny pin light. It's a flashlight. Someone's calling me, and it is Bill Geiger. And he's working on staff at that time, and I guess there was going to be a terrible electrical storm, and they wanted to come get us and bring us into camp. And they had gone off in the middle of the night when it's really dark with one little flashlight in the pontoon boat to come get us, and they came into shore. We all get on the pontoon boat, and then it won't go back because it came in empty. Now it's full. And so being rescued in the middle of the night was fun. Going out on canoe trips, we were on a canoe trip on the infamous Pine River, which can be really calm or really deadly, and it was pretty deadly this one year. And within about 15 minutes, all of us had tipped, and we actually lost one whole canoe, and we were sort of hanging from trees and stuff and got picked up. That was fun. And another time, we actually slept through a tornado, not realizing it, and everything was soaked, but there was nothing to do, so we just kept going the next day with wet clothes. But those all sound like disasters, but those are the things you remember the most. You know, the cakes that didn't turn out, but they still tasted really good, even though they were goo. You saw them the next morning. It was like, oh, we ate that. So it was that type of thing, the group thing, working together. I learned to swim because of Camp Echo. The first year I went to Camp Echo, I made red swimmer, and I was really embarrassed. And that year I went back to the Y, took lessons religiously, and the next summer I was in the highest swim group. Gave me the momentum and motivation to get something done. Camp Echo was a huge part of the Gilford family experience. It was just a given that we would go to family camp each summer, and Liza, I'm telling the truth when I said her first time at Camp Echo she was 10 days old. And she's been every summer since then, and she's just turned 26. So she grew up there, and Liza was allowed to be a Liza. She's a very special young woman, and Camp Echo embraced her. She could be who she needed to be with no apologies. People loved her. She felt accepted. And when we got to the point where it was time for her Bas Mitzvah, she says it has to have a Camp Echo theme. So we turned the Women's Club in Evanston into Camp Echo, and during appetizers we did square dancing, which you always have square dancing at family camp. The staff, we told, don't wear tuxedos or anything, wear T-shirts. So they wore T-shirts that just said staff on it, and on each of the tables we had a loaf of Wonder Bread and a dish of peanut butter and a jar of jelly, and we served fried chicken and bug juice and mashed potatoes and corn. And instead of a candle lighting ceremony with a cake, we had a sort of a fake log fire, and it was everybody put a log. Everybody that was called out, instead of a candle, they used a log and put it into the fire, and we sang camp songs. So it was all about Camp Echo.